Let's get right into it. Number 9. The fake vampire attack. Back in the 1950s, the Philippines had a communist rebel group called the Huks causing trouble in the countryside. The CIA needed a way to make these rebels leave certain areas, but they didn't want to use violence, so they came up with something straight out of a horror movie. First, CIA operatives spread rumors in Huk territory about a creature called an aswang, a vampire-like monster from Filipino folklore. Then, they waited for the Huks to set up camp in the jungle. The CIA agents would grab the last person in a Huk patrol. They'd make 2 puncture marks on the victim's neck, Hollywood vampire style. Then, they'd hang the body upside down, drain it of blood, and leave it for the other rebels to find. When the Huks found their comrade drained of blood with vampire marks on his neck, they freaked out. These were people who grew up hearing stories about the aswang. The rebels abandoned their camps in that area within hours. This psychological warfare operation was so successful that the CIA documented it in their training manuals. The agency actually admitted to doing this in declassified documents, a perfect example of using local folklore as a weapon. Number 8. The Psychic Spies. In 1972, the CIA decided they needed psychic powers. This wasn't a joke. They spent $20 million taxpayer dollars on it. They called it Project Stargate, and it ran for over 20 years. The goal was to train people to spy on enemies using just their minds, a technique they called remote viewing. They actually had some hits. One of their star psychics, Joe McMoneagle, supposedly described a secret Soviet submarine facility that satellite photos later confirmed. Another time, they claim one of their viewers accurately drew details of a secret Chinese nuclear facility, but the program was wildly inconsistent. Sometimes their psychics would come back with complete nonsense. The CIA would give their viewers sealed envelopes with target coordinates inside, and the psychics had to describe what was there. Sometimes they'd sit in a room for hours, drawing whatever popped into their heads. The program kept getting funding because these psychics would occasionally get things right, just enough to keep the project alive. It finally shut down in 1995 when an external review concluded that remote viewing, while perhaps a real phenomenon, was not reliable enough for gathering intelligence. Number 7. Project Azorian. Imagine losing your keys in the ocean. Now imagine those keys are actually a Soviet nuclear submarine, and the ocean is 3 miles deep. That was the situation the CIA faced in 1968 when a Soviet K-129 sub sank in the Pacific. The CIA wanted those nuclear missiles and code books, but they couldn't just send divers down. They needed a cover story to build the most expensive ship in history at the time, the Hughes Glomar Explorer. So they created a fake story about mining manganese from the ocean floor and got Howard Hughes, the famous reclusive billionaire, to pretend it was his project. Nobody questioned it, because it was exactly the kind of crazy thing Howard Hughes would do. The ship itself was insane. It had a giant mechanical claw hidden inside, the size of a building. Think of an arcade claw machine, but instead of grabbing a stuffed animal, it was trying to pick up a 2,000-ton submarine from the bottom of the ocean. But when they finally tried to grab the sub, the claw broke. Part of the submarine, including most of the good stuff like the nukes and code books, fell back to the ocean floor. The operation, codenamed Project Azorian, remained secret for years. When journalists started asking questions, the CIA came up with a phrase we still use today: "We can neither confirm nor deny." That's right. This mission is literally where that phrase comes from. Number 6. Operation Chaos. It's the 1960s. People are protesting the Vietnam War, and the CIA became convinced that anyone who didn't support the war must be working for foreign powers, so they launched Operation Chaos. Under this program, the CIA created files on over 300,000 American citizens. They infiltrated student groups, peace organizations, and activist movements. They had agents pretending to be students, journalists, and protesters. The CIA was so paranoid, they even spied on prominent folk singers. Here's the kicker. After years of spying, infiltrating, and millions of taxpayer dollars, they found exactly zero evidence of foreign influence on the anti-war movement. Turns out, people just genuinely didn't want the war. The whole operation was completely illegal. The CIA charter forbids it from operating domestically and spying on American citizens, but they did it anyway for 7 years. When Congress found out in 1975, the agency was forced to swear it would never happen again. Number 5. The radio station that caused a coup. Imagine if a foreign power created a fake news channel that was the only thing you could watch, and it reported a massive, bloody civil war was happening in your country. That's basically what the CIA pulled off in Guatemala in 1954. Guatemala's president, Jacobo Arbenz, wanted to give unused farmland back to poor farmers. Some of that land belonged to the powerful United Fruit Company, which had friends in Washington. So, the CIA set up a tiny radio station just outside Guatemala's borders called the Voice of Liberation. They hired actors and sound effects artists to create fake news broadcasts. These broadcasts reported on completely made-up rebel armies marching through Guatemala and massive battles that never happened. To make it even more effective, the CIA also jammed Guatemala's real radio stations, so when people turned on their radios, all they could hear was this fake rebel station. The psychological effect was insane. The Guatemalan army, hearing these reports of overwhelming rebel forces, didn't want to fight an army they thought was huge. Military commanders started surrendering to an army that didn't even exist. Arbenz' government collapsed in just a few days, overthrown by a phantom army of about 400 actual rebels and a whole lot of really convincing radio drama. The CIA basically gaslit an entire country into a coup. Number 4, the Doctor Spy. In 2011, the CIA was hunting for Osama bin Laden, who they believed was hiding in Abbottabad, Pakistan. They couldn't just go door to door, so they came up with an insidious plan. They set up a fake vaccination program. The CIA hired a local doctor, Shakil Afridi, to go door to door offering free hepatitis B vaccines to children. While he was administering the program, his real mission was to secretly collect DNA samples from the kids in the compound where they suspected bin Laden was hiding. They hoped to get a DNA match to bin Laden's family members, confirming his location. The plan worked. They confirmed the location, and the raid went ahead. But the fallout was catastrophic. When the public found out about the fake vaccination program, trust in actual medical workers in Pakistan plummeted. Real vaccination rates for diseases like polio dropped dramatically. Militant groups began targeting and killing dozens of legitimate health workers, believing they could be spies. The damage was so severe that in 2014, the CIA had to promise it would never use vaccination programs as cover for operations again. But the trust was already broken, setting back public health efforts in the region by years. Number 3, the secret war in Laos. While the world's attention was on Vietnam, the CIA was running its own private war right next door in Laos. For nearly a decade, from 1964 to 1973, it was one of the largest covert operations in history, and it was kept completely secret from Congress and the American public. The CIA recruited and trained a secret army of over 30,000 soldiers, mostly from the local Hmong Hill tribes, to fight communist forces. To supply this army, the CIA created its own proprietary airline, Air America. It was one of the largest airlines in the world, running thousands of flights to drop supplies, transport troops, and conduct rescue missions. The US dropped more bombs on Laos during this period than were dropped on all of Europe during World War II, making Laos the most heavily bombed country per capita in history. Much of this bombing was done to disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but it devastated the country. An estimated 30% of the bombs never exploded. Today, Laotian farmers are still being killed by unexploded ordnance from a secret war that ended almost 50 years ago. Number 2, the agency's drug lord allies. In the 1960s, the CIA was running its secret war in Laos. To fund their local allies, they turned a blind eye while their partners, including high-ranking officials in the Royal Lao government, trafficked opium and heroin. The CIA's own airline, Air America, was documented flying opium for the agency's Hmong allies. Some of this heroin ended up in the veins of American soldiers fighting in Vietnam. This wasn't a one-time thing. In the 1980s, the CIA did it again in Central America. They were backing the Contra rebels fighting against Nicaragua's socialist government. Congress had banned funding them, so the CIA got creative. They allied with traffickers who were smuggling cocaine into the United States to raise money for the Contras. When journalists started investigating this, they were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. But in 1998, the CIA's own Inspector General released a report that confirmed the agency had worked with drug-affiliated individuals and had, at times, looked the other way to protect its intelligence operations. Number 1. The Castro Plots. In the 1960s, the CIA was obsessed with getting rid of Fidel Castro. This obsession led to some of the most bizarre and comical assassination plots ever conceived. Declassified documents show they came up with hundreds of ideas. First, the exploding cigar. They actually planned to pack Castro's favorite cigars with enough explosives to blow his head off mid-smoke. Then there was the poisoned wetsuit. Knowing Castro loved to scuba dive, they planned to give him a diving suit lined with a fungus that would cause a chronic skin disease, and for good measure, they dusted the breathing apparatus with tuberculosis bacteria. They tried to put thallium salts in his shoes, a chemical used in rat poison, hoping it would make his iconic beard fall out. The theory was that a beardless Castro would lose his charismatic power over the Cuban people. They even hired his ex-girlfriend to poison him with pills she was supposed to slip into his drink. but the pills dissolved in the cold cream jar she hid them in, and when their own spycraft failed, they turned to the professionals. The CIA actually hired mafia bosses, including Chicago's Sam Giancana, offering them $150,000 to arrange a hit on Castro. Every single attempt failed. Castro outlived most of the agents who tried to kill him, dying of natural causes at 90. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.